We are resuming our hearing with the Department of Finance. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Chair. Senator McGrath has some questions.
Thank you. Under what circumstances would finance adopt significant changes in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook compared to budget, including economic parameters and expenditure or receipts that have been accounted for incorrectly?
So, what's your question? Under what circumstances? So the Charter of Budget Honesty is very clear about what my obligations are and the Secretary of Treasury's obligations are in relation to what has to be included in PFO, and it has to provide our honest and best assessment of both economic parameters and what the fiscal implications are. Typically, if you look at PFOs over the period since they've been in place, when a budget has been brought down, there is relatively small changes from the bottom line because, of course, when a budget's brought down just before an election's called, there's a pretty small gap usually between the budget and PFO, but it will include decisions which were taken after after the budget was landed, like I think there was one where there was some disaster spending which was decided after the budget had been brought down but before the writs had been issued. And as we talked about earlier, the PFO, while it doesn't affect the bottom line, PFOs have typically revealed information in the budget, like decisions taken but not announced, which have been in the budget. They have been in the bottom line, but it just provides that additional transparency around that detail. So, when a budget update and a PFO are close, generally, it's a pretty exceptional circumstance which would lead to a difference in the outcome, but it would be revealed transparently.
Okay, I suppose we might be facing such a circumstance in that President Trump has said that April 2 will be Freedom Day, and that may have significant tariff announcements that could impact us and our trading partners. And I know we don't do hypotheticals, but I think it's certain to fall within the 10 days in which the PFO can be released. Is it possible that the economic impacts of those tariffs would be significant enough to warrant inclusion?
As you say, Senator, a hypothetical question, very hard to answer that without knowing the details of what is announced. It's also a question that would be a matter for Treasury. Treasury will determine whether there's any change in the economic parameters that could be required. One thing that the budget documents do, but also that one thing that would be an option in circumstances like this, particularly when, sometimes there might be an announcement, but it might take some time to either understand the details of that announcement and certainly to determine what the implications of that announcement would be for the economy more broadly, because I guess as the Treasurer has pointed out, when you try and think about what the economic implications of an announcement around tariffs would be, you have to think about what the direct impacts are as well as what the indirect impacts are. So that's reasonably complicated, and I would be nervous committing Treasury at this point. You can certainly ask them tomorrow, but I'd be nervous committing exactly what they could do within the time frame that's available to us, because we have to issue PFO within 10 days of the writs being issued. But there could be room to at least highlight the risks that it presents. Potentially some sensitivity would be possible, but so that we'll have to give careful consideration to this.
I suppose to assist with transparency, this building seems to be of the decision that the Prime Minister is going to call an election tomorrow morning, and we may not sadly have a chance to put these questions to Treasury. And you've sort of touched upon this, but in terms of how would you capture the timing of the announcement in relation to what may happen on April 2 in relation to the PFO?
Just say that. What's the question?
How are you going to capture I'm concerned about the timing, because you touched upon your answer, and I realise this is more within Treasury, but we're having a conversation here. How can you give effect to such a significant announcement that may happen by President Trump on the 2nd of April? You've mentioned it in your answer that you may not know all the details, you may need more time, but is there a way that you can give effect to it?
It's very hard for me to say without knowing the details. I mean, we have the legal obligation to issue PFO within 10 days of the writs being issued, so we have to meet those timeframes. And you know, Stephen Kennedy and I have to think about what's the most appropriate way of reflecting as effectively as possible the information that's available. Even when you think about the 10-day time frame for releasing PFO, you know, you have to count back from that to think about, you know, if there were to be any changes in economic parameters, how much time would need to be taken for that to then flow through? Would it flow through on the payment side or the receipt side? It's quite complicated to flow that all through, but would there be scope to acknowledge in PFO the significance of what's announced, depending on what is announced? Absolutely.
Now, earlier, my colleague, Senator Hume, discussed the 11.2% wage increase for public servants that's not being properly accounted for in the budget, given that total wage costs have been...
That's your assertion.
We're getting on so nicely, Senator Gallagher.
Not from what I hear about your behaviour today, Senator McGrath.
I give as good as I take.
Well, I hear you give a bit more than that.
Well, perhaps people shouldn't make allegations about me. Now, Secretary, Senator Hume wrote to you about this matter previously, and I'm seeking your assurance that the public sector wages will be accurately reflected in PFO?
They are in the budget.
So we dealt with this last estimates, and I tried to articulate as clearly as I could in the letter back to Minister Hume exactly how we do projections for departmental expenses in the budget. We are not making any changes to the way in which we do we prepare our departmental expense projections in the budget. It's exactly the same as the way we always have. There's an indexation factor that we apply. That indexation factor is a function of both the wage price index and the CPI. It's the same index. Well, it's been updated, but it's an indexation factor which is designed to capture, to some degree, the wage and cost and price pressures in the economy. Offsetting that, of course, there's terminating programs, there's ons and offs always in these exercises, and we will apply exactly the same methodology that we have always applied to project departmental expenses. And then it will be up to accountable authorities like myself to determine how we spend those in terms of how we split that spending between supplier expenses and staffing.
So for PFO, will the figures be updated? I'm taking that as I don't want to verbal you. So in terms of the public sector wages, will they be? Will PFO reflect any changes there? If
there were changes to the WPI forecasts, wage price index forecasts, or CPI forecasts, or there were changes to other decisions. There were other decisions which affected departmental expenses that would change, but my working assumption is that there are unlikely to be updates to those projections given the small gap between the budget and PFO.
I wouldn't be worried about the wage increase, Senator McGrath. You're going to sack 40,000 workers. If you listen to your leader tonight, you're going to sack them from Canberra. I don't think wage increases is going to be the worry for those workers. It's actually not having a job under you.
Okay, thank you, Minister, for that. Can I get on to spending on advertising? Is there a public advertising campaign for the budget?
No.
I don't think so, no.
No, there isn't. Nope.
No.
There are different components within the budget, though, that relate to other advertising campaigns.
Not new ones. Look, we go through nothing's changed there from when you were in government either. There's an independent campaign committee that assesses public information campaigns. There's some underway. When the election is called, some will continue, some will stop. And we spend a lot less than you did on government advertising.
So who's on the independent campaign committee?
It's 3 people, 3 individuals that have been responsible for decisions. Every campaign over a certain threshold goes through that committee.
So current members of the committee, the chair is Meredith Fairweather, and the members are Adam Davey and Alison Warrington.
So I just want to confirm there's no advertising campaign for the budget, but there are obviously advertising campaigns that have been budgeted for in relation to certain departments.
Well, in relation to previous ongoing campaigns, certainly nothing that's a new measure in here will get to a point where there's able to be a public information campaign attached to it. So it'll be ongoing campaigns, of which there are a few. Some will continue, and we will observe the appropriate processes about reaching agreement on what ones continue. They are usually ones like public health messaging, perhaps defence recruitment, things like that, and the others will stop.
So the Future Made Australia campaign?
I don't think that would be one that we would be continuing. So we would write to the shadow, but I wouldn't expect that one to be there to be agreement on.
Yeah, I mean, the caretaker conventions are very clear around campaign advertising. So as soon as an election is called, one of the roles that finance has is that we immediately cease all campaign advertising.
With the exception of the AEC.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then a decision is taken about whether which of the existing campaigns could be restarted, because the judgment is that they are not political in nature.
Okay. So when would you write to the? Is it you, Minister, who writes, or you, Secretary?
Yeah, I would write to Senator Hume and engage with her.
Okay.
As Senator Birmingham did with me. Okay. It's pretty standard. The main ones are public health ones.
And I think defence recruiting. I think
maybe.
Yeah.
I mean that would be one that's usually continues, but obviously need to reach agreement with you guys.
Okay. And so there'll be no other campaigns that would be running?
Well, none other than the AEC and whatever we reach agreement with Senator Hume over.
Okay. Can I move on to the Clean Energy Finance Corporation? I've got a query in relation to that. I understand there's an additional $2 billion in equity towards the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. What's that for, may I ask?
It's to recapitalise. I'm pretty sure.
Budget paper 2, page 27. It says the government will provide $2 billion to recapitalise the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, and then has some bit of word salad.
Well, to do its job. I mean, that's its mandate.
Yeah.
So what's the?
So that it can keep entering into projects as it has been doing for many years now.
So what's the current capital position of the corporation?
Well, that's probably a question for another portfolio, but Yeah.
I might have it. Hold on.
I think you're the responsible minister.
Well, I'm a shareholder,
Yeah.
but I'm not the portfolio minister. I'm a shareholder or another minister in all of the specialist investment vehicles, so I have a line of sight, particularly over the financial arrangements and, you know, some of the governance matters. But the portfolio responsibility, the actual operation of the CEFC is the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
So point in budget paper 1, page 318 to 321, there is the detail on each of the specialist investment vehicles. And the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, you can see halfway down page 319, it shows that as of 30 June 2024, so these are usually brought to book at the end of every financial year, CFC had 31.9 billion made available to it for investment, of which 10.9 billion had been committed to projects.
So, in the 23-24 budget, the government previously had supplied an additional $20.5 billion, of which 11.5 was provided immediately, and then a further 9 billion was able to be added by new appropriation. I just want to confirm the $2 billion that I started off this line of questioning with, is that new funding or is it part of the $9 billion?
Senator, I think that's new. I think the thing with the numbers the Secretary just mentioned, the 31 billion approximately total funding includes rewiring the nation funding, and the 2 billion recapitalisation was in a sense to recapitalise its sort of general portfolio of funds that it's to do its other activities.
So, and if you can walk me through with this. So, it has $31.9 billion made available to it for investment, of which $10.9 billion has been committed to projects. Why does it need another $2 billion?
So, Senator, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to help you much further. There are advanced discussions with the states on the rewiring the nation element of the funding that's been allocated to the CEFC, and I think it's worthwhile keeping those a bit separate in your mind. And this $2 billion recapitalisation is for what I would call is the general purpose of the CEFC. Sorry, do you have anything to add there, Mr. Sorvello?
No, that's it.
So the my maths is terrible. The $21 billion, that's for rewiring the nation. The spare...
It's around
20 billion for rewiring the nation, which you've just announced you're going to abolish, and that would mean, I think, ripping up a number of agreements with the states. So I'm not actually entirely sure how you would do that, but that's what I heard in the budget reply tonight. But the $2 billion is to recapitalise the general operating revenue of the CEFC to do the things it's been doing aside from rewiring the nation.
That's right.
So just in relation to the $20 billion, so that is formally acquitted against agreements with the states, Minister?
Well, again, that's probably best asked of Climate Change and Energy, but my understanding is either there are agreements or advanced negotiations around those agreements. I don't know if others can... it's essentially creating the energy the grid that we need for a dispersed energy system that's going to happen even if you do your mad nuclear plans. So I'm actually not sure how you're going to do that, but it, obviously is a thing that floats your boat in your budget reply.
No, yes, it's very good. Cool, no, thank you. Minister, for that. Now, Secretary, Senator Hume, at the last estimates in questioning to you, said that, that you said you did not rule out that you had discussed an economic and fiscal statement, because I remember there was a bit of toing and froing about whether there was going to be a budget or a statement and the difference thereof. But we've had a cyclone and now we're at budget estimates. So for the preparation of this budget, when did the Department of Finance first send draft measure descriptions up to the Finance Minister's office?
Well, I can answer that. It would have been in the last month, I would imagine, over the last month.
So in the last 4 weeks?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Can you recall the date, Minister?
Well, honestly, I mean, look at the number of budget books. All of these get sent to me in one way or another. You know, I said at the time we were planning for a budget. We've been planning for a budget since my EFO. We've been working on a budget. We've handed down a budget. And the normal processes of being provided measure descriptions and other drafts of budget documents were followed in the usual way, as you would expect.
So in terms of the time frame of the measures being sent up to your office, Minister, you're saying it's within the normal time frame?
Yes.
It's normally within the
Actually,
month.
I feel like we were a bit more organised this year.
I think it was a little early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it was a bit of a, maybe I'm just getting used to it, but certainly from my point of view, I felt it went very smoothly and was a little less hurried than previous times.
When was a draft statement of risks first provided to the Minister's office?
Well, it would have been in that month, and I think from memory, reasonably early in that month.
So we're saying like 4 weeks ago, so today's date is the 27th of March. We're saying the beginning of March?
You know.
So I think the Minister said within the last month.
Yeah.
We'd have to take on notice exactly
Honestly.
when we provided the drafts up. I mean, we work on these documents over a period of time, and then we finalise them and send them up for the Minister to approve. So happy to take on notice when we provided them to the Minister for hers.
It was very much in the normal way that these things happen. Nothing unusual, Senator McGrath.
Were there later inclusions?
In what way?
Well, to the provision of that draft statement, were there...
Of risks?
Yes.
Well, I cleared a statement of risks that appeared in my in-tray, so...
So the statement of risks was cleared in very much in the normal... So there's a sort of a normal process for landing a budget, and the statement of risks was cleared and agreed.
But if you're asking if I cleared
timeframes.
one and then something was added, and then I had to clear that is not what happened. So it was just, it's the normal clearance process. Yeah.
Thank you. You've answered the next question. Prior to the printing of the budget books, did Finance run the reconciliation and close the central budget management system?
Well, we always do.
Yeah, that's what
So you did?
happens.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
God, we'd be worried if they didn't.
In every budget, so Senator, in every budget process, there's a number of reconciliations which are undertaken, and every time that we are preparing to undertake a new reconciliation, you have to close off CBMS. Then you do the reconciliation, and then decisions taken to open it for the next set of decisions to go in. That's just the way it works. You know, in normal budget process, there's, I was going to say anywhere between 3 and 5 reconciliations take place in a normal budget, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but we always hope for 3, and I don't think I've ever been involved in a budget where there have been only 3.
So how many were in this budget?
So I think there were 4. I think that's right. Yeah,
When was the first one? Can you tell me the dates?
No,
I'm not sure what sort of secret piece of information you're trying to gather here, Senator McGrath. Honestly, it was a normal process. Everything was cleared normally. The system worked properly. It was a little less stressful than the last time from my memory or from my point of view. The system worked well.
But, well, we shouldn't be worried then about my line of questioning.
No, but I'm just...
Because it's so
like,
innocent.
Well, exactly. Like, I don't know what... But are you really enjoying spending time here at 8:45 asking about the mechanics of the
with respect, Minister,
CBMS system?
we'd all prefer to be somewhere else.
Right. Well, feel free to find that place, Senator McGrath.
Suspect that may happen tomorrow. But can you tell me when the first reconciliation happened and the subsequent ones? Which dates?
well, I'm happy to take that on notice. I don't think we usually reveal that information in any budget that I've been involved in, but let me take it
Would
on
be
notice.
within the last month.
So, once again, within the last 4 weeks?
Yep.
Cool.
I think so. Approximately.
Now, I do want to ask about the income tax cuts. And now I realise that
Treasury,
revenue,
yeah.
that's just considering what's going to happen tomorrow, what assistance you can provide would be gratefully received.
Well, very little. We're not responsible for the tax cuts. Treasury will appear tomorrow.
The Department of Finance would still brief the Finance Minister regarding revenue measures such as income tax cuts?
Well, they briefed me on all matters relating to the budget.
So when did the Department Secretary first brief the Minister on options for tax changes since the last budget?
Oh, that's about government deliberations, and we don't go into that.
The government announced the vast majority of major spending decisions contained in the budget before Cyclone Alfred hit. Is that correct?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, Medicare.
Okay.
Yeah, things like
well,
that.
specifically, yep. Medicare, yep.
Yeah. So, but the one significant measure that was not announced was the income tax cuts. Did the department have any involvement in discussions of the income tax cuts or brief the minister regarding the tax cuts announced in the budget before the 7th of March?
Well, I have a number of discussions both with colleagues and departments, and I'm fully across all matters relating to the budget at all times. That's the way we work. Between Dr. Chalmers and myself, there are very few secrets when it comes to the budget. We work together on almost every part of it, and I feel very well supported by the Department of Finance.
But I suppose my question is, the department. Was the department involved in discussion of income tax cuts before the 7th of March?
Well, the department doesn't confirm what discussions it's been involved in as part of the budget deliberations. That's long-standing practice.
Yeah, so we're involved in any sort of in all matters to do with in all matters that end up in the budget, and that's just in the normal course of these things being considered.
When was the Department of Finance first made aware of the income tax cuts in their current form?
No, we don't. It's part of the budget deliberations.
Secretary,
That would have been your answer when Matthias and Simon were sitting here, and it's my answer now.
Were they considered by ERC or were they done by a letter process?
It went through our normal processes. The Prime Minister runs a very traditional government where ministers are consulted, unlike the government you were a member of, where the Prime Minister was the Treasurer, the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister all at the one time without the Treasurer or Finance Minister knowing. Our Prime Minister operates differently. He runs a traditional Cabinet, and we have our standard processes, which includes committees of Cabinet considering all matters relating to the budget.
So the the income tax cuts would have gone through the ERC
Well, I've answered
process
it.
then.
I'm answering. I'm not telling you what the ERC considered, but I've answered it in another way.
Right. Move on to, can I confirm that there are no changes to the 1% efficiency dividend that was discussed in the last estimates?
Correct.
So no changes whatsoever. So it's still
It's still 1%.
Still 1%.
And the existing exemptions, both partial and full, remain the same, Senator.
So I want to turn now to the measure savings from external labour extension, which is on page 32 of budget paper 2. Have to work with me here. It looks like the additional year of 28-29 in the forward estimates, you have like in the 2024-25 budget reduced departmental funding for agencies and departments worth $718 million in the new year. Is that correct?
Yep.
0.8. Yep.
Yep.
So I can confirm that, as you told this committee in February, that this $780 million is only applied to those agencies where the efficiency dividend is applied.
So it's
Yes.
slightly.
Yeah, there's some
There are
slight
slight differences. So there are, I think, as I indicated, Senator, at the last, there are some additional agencies, entities that have been exempt from this particular save, but for whom the efficiency dividend does apply.
Can you tell me which ones, please?
So it includes the so ASIO and ASIS, though that is consistent with national security, so that we have basically the same rules for them under this as we would normally do with an exemption under the efficiency dividend for national security agencies. The National Collecting Institution, so the 9 of those. Do you need me to read those out? No, that's fine. High Court of Australia, the ANAO, Domestic Family and Sexual Violence Commission, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, the Administrative Review Tribunal, IP Australia, and the parliamentary departments.
So if any agency is, those agencies that are exempt from the efficiency dividend, that means they're also exempt from the departmental funding, that's correct?
Sorry, Senator, I think we've just, so I think
Am I- we're
Ms
cross
Patterson
purposes?
just, yeah, so
These
there
are-
are a whole set of agencies that are exempt from the efficiency dividend. In addition,
Yep.
the agencies that Ms Patterson just read out are exempt from
Okay, I get you.
this
The external labour save.
external labour save.
Yes.
Cool. So I just want to get this on the record. The efficiency dividend is a reduction of 1% of departmental funding from the appropriation to drive efficiencies.
Correct.
Okay. And the saving from external labour measures is a reduction of a set amount of departmental funding which could have hypothetically been spent on external labour, so it is being removed.
Yes.
Okay, even though that is because the department funding it could also been spent on other matters.
So Senator, essentially how it works is that funding is a proportion of departments' supplier expenses, so a narrower component of their departmental expenses. And the way that save is allocated is we take that funding from agencies before we give them their departmental funding. But obviously with a clear indication of the government's intent that those, in a sense, those efficiencies or savings need to be delivered by reducing expenditure.
That's
on
where we
external
believe
labour.
there's
Yeah.
room for those agencies to make savings.
So the distribution of the external labour save is slightly different from the efficiency dividend because entities who have a higher proportion of spending on supplier expenses make a proportionately greater contribution under this save.
So they can take a portion of it away and then call it a saving?
No,
Well,
this
they don't
is,
get it.
They don't get it.
This is
So it's saved.
Yes, so it is a saving because if there was, say, $10 that we were going to give to a department, we would take $1 and we give them 9, so we have saved the $1.
Okay.
Yep.
Might have to come back to that. Can I now get on to... I just want to ask about some adjustments to the figures on the staffing of agencies that are in the table in budget. Budget paper 4, thank you. There are some adjustments in the historic figures. Can you take me through that?
24/5.
Sorry?
The figure for the 24/5 year, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
So the first estimates for the 24/5 year are determined in the 24/5 budget. That's an estimate from entities as to what their average staffing level will be. And in the subsequent budget, they report on an updated estimate, because they haven't actually finished the 24/5 year, of what their ASL was in that year.
And then they will report again in their annual report as to their, at the end of 24/25, what their final ASL was for 24/25. So at this point in time, that is still an estimate for 24/25 because we haven't made it to the end of that financial year.
What, I think 21/22 also, was it? So what happened there?
Well, that's probably what your officers are measuring the baseline from, is it?
So there haven't been any changes back
No.
to 21/22, but I think I've seen a little bit of commentary around it. I think it's
Different sets
the
of figures.
question is whether the 21/22 figures were the ones that were the first estimates or the revised estimates at the end of the year.
So, just so I can understand, so why would the figure, can we go back to, why would the figures, why would the tables be different?
Because
you
there's
just take me-
estimates and then there's actual, really.
Why does the 24/5 ASL vary? Why has that varied? Is that your question?
Yeah.
So that could be for a couple of different reasons. It could reflect on, the success of recruitment over the course of a year by an entity. It could reflect
New
decisions that have been taken that might have been reflected in my EFO or could even have been reflected in this budget, and how those have varied over time. And it, reflects the decisions that are taken by accountable authorities around how the funding that's appropriated to the department is most effectively spent. So there are some entities who over the course of the year may have decided to recruit ASL rather than have, for example, contractors perform some functions, and that would then lead to an increase in ASL.
Yeah, so Senator,
Something about
there are certainly
the
those
not
three
reporting
reasons. It could be some
final
conversions, as the Secretary said. Some of it could be decisions that were made in my EFO towards the end of the year, because sometimes a decision will be made to give resourcing to a department for the remaining 6 months of the year. And then the sort of third category then is largely around internal decisions made by accountable authorities.
So I suppose, bearing that in mind, I want to go back to 21/22.
Yep.
The 25/26 budget papers have got 21/22 at 171,938, but in the 24/25 budget, the figure for that year was 173,142. So I'm just trying to understand the sort of a reasonable difference there. So I'm trying to understand why there's an historical revision, because that's some time ago.
Yep.
Senator Paul Fitzner, First Assistant Secretary, Budget Group.
The figure, those two figures that you reported are the 21-22 ASL figures that were reported in the 22-23 March budget and then the 22-23 October budget. So the usual practice that we follow in the historical estimates table, so looking at the 25-26 budget papers, we usually record the revised estimate as the Secretary indicated. So the final estimate that was done for the 21-22 year was 171,938 for 21-22. That was included in the 22-23 October budget. I don't have the 24-25 budget papers in front of me, so I'm not sure why that number, or what numbers appear there, but that's the methodology that's gone into the 25-26 historical papers.
Okay. Can you get them for me? Is that possible?
I don't know if anyone has that here. We can check that on notice.
Budget paper 4.
It just seems quite a big revision. That's all.
Yep.
What page are you on, Senator, on budget paper 4?
Budget paper.
So I think
100 page 165.
So the thing I would say, Senator, is just that the difference is between the 21-22 estimate, which was estimated at the March, when the budget was landed in March, compared with what the final estimate was when the October budget was landed. I guess at the point of the March budget, we still had 4 months to go in that year. And it was still the case that, and you know, the ASL estimate is an average over the whole. The thing about average staffing levels is it's the average estimate of full-time equivalent employees over a whole year. So there were, if you like, 4 more months of staffing in that year that were not clear. That by the time we got to the October budget, we had estimates of actuals for.
So I can understand the logic there, but the figures changed between the budget paper, the same table between last year and this year. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah,
why
so
has it changed in the last year? Because surely the reconciliation shouldn't. I don't want to.
Can we take that on notice? That the minister. It may be the case that in last year's budget papers, what was included was not the final estimate for 21-22, but it was actually the March budget estimate for 21-22. So I'm happy to take that on notice. Sorry, I hadn't been across that detail and aware of that change. But the consistent approach we've taken in every year has been to use the final best estimate from the budget process.
But I still don't understand why it changed between last year and this year.
Because I think it's been addressing an inconsistency.
Yeah.
Is my understanding.
But that means that
Between actuals and forecasts.
But surely it shouldn't take 3 or so years to catch up on this inconsistency that you're talking about.
Well, it may be that someone's just realised.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's seriously, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you're worried about. You're about to sack 41,000 if you win the election. So this is really a bit of a moot point.
I'm very happy to take on notice the process of how we uncovered it will be in the QA process where it will have been realised that actually what we had referred to was the March budget, whereas we should have been capturing the October budget. But Senator, I'm happy to take on notice how we came across that and what we subsequently, the decision making around updating that figure in the budget.
Because I think if I'm reading these tables correctly, very small, I think the figures for 23, 24 have also changed.
21, 22, 22, 23, 24, 25.
So I can't understand why. I know you've still taken on notice, but this seems pretty...
Well, officials are able to take things on notice, Senator McGrath.
I realise that, Minister,
Yeah.
but this is a pretty, I'd say, not inconsistent...
Well, it's not as big as sacking 40,000 public servants from
Thank you,
Canberra.
Minister.
Well, you won't have a finance department or a treasury if that's actually what you plan on doing. So I really don't know why you're hung up on page 165 of BP4 when if you win the election, there will be 41,000 less public servants.
Well, with respect
from
to
Canberra.
It looks like we can't actually keep track of how many public servants we have because the
Well,
figures seem to
I don't think
change.
that matters. You've said you'll sack 40,000 and your Leader of the Opposition confirmed that tonight. So,
Well, so for example, in last year's budget papers, the number was for 2023-24 191,861, but this year's budget papers say the figure 197,108. So, I mean, that's 6,000 public servants that have appeared on the books for the same financial year. I just don't know where they've come from. Like, I can understand, you know, with reconciliations there might be small changes, but 6,000 public servants?
well, that's a pretty small number compared to the ones that you want to sack.
Thank you, Minister.
Well, I'm not going to let it go because you'll destroy the public service if you do that. And, you know, I don't think I can just let that go after what I've heard tonight. So I'm going to keep saying it all night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I suppose what is the record-keeping process to make sure that the figures are accurate? Because
Well, there's an estimate and then there's an actual. And so we rely on departments to give us the actual at the end of the year. And we also rely on departments for the forecasts. But there are ons and offs during the year where departments make decisions about that and then they report against it.
So under that, you're saying that departments have just added 6,000 public servants.
Well, I understand, and I've just advised that the 197,000 figure was on page 169 of BP4 in last year's budget. So it was transparent in the budget, but there had been an error in table 2.3, which has been corrected. And I think the footnote, there is an explanation of that, which we've tried to give. There's some corrections that have happened in making sure that we are essentially measuring like with like, so between forecasts and actuals.
So, I mean, Secretary, does it concern you that there is this, that the tables are effectively thousands out?
So, Senator, I mean, what concerns me is to make sure that the data is as accurate as possible. As I've said, I have taken on notice that I will seek a full briefing from the team as to which, if any, numbers have changed and why they've changed, and what was the source of any error. But I can't do anything more than that at this.
Do you have confidence in this table that the figures are correct?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
But the figures... So, sorry, yes, you should have... I didn't actually specify which table before you said
I
yes.
presume it's table 2.3. Is it? Or is it another table?
Yes, but...
Right.
But you've said before, Minister, that there was an error on table 2.3.
Well, as I am advised, there was, but the number was correct in another part of the budget paper. But the responsibility is to ensure that the information where it may have been incorrect, and Senator, the Secretary has taken that on notice, is to clarify that and make sure it's updated appropriately, which it is. But really, I mean, what a moot point tonight when you say you're going to sack 41,000. I don't understand what your problem is here.
How many you've got?
Minister,
We
6,000
report
public
how
servants.
many we got. Senator
6,000 public
McGrath
servants
is going back to 2020, 21. Come on. The information is correct and you're banking your savings on it, mate. So if they're not correct, you've got a big black hole in your savings, because from what I hear tonight, you're hoping to get $7 billion a year out of the public service.
So I just want to say...
And I think that would make table 2.3 to be very different next time round.
Minister, with respect, we're trying to work out actually how many public servants there are, and what we've found is that across the tables, that 4 years are actually different, and I think that is of concern.
Right. What is your concern? Please tell me, what is your concern about
I am concerned
this?
with respect, Minister. You just said, "Oh, there's a mistake on table 2.3."
No, I said there had been, not that there was on this table 2.3.
So there seems quite a flippant attitude in relation to, from not from the officials at the table, that, but from you, Minister, in relation to, you don't seem concerned that there were mistakes here in relation...
Do you know what I'm concerned about? 41,000 public servants from Canberra being sacked.
Yes,
that is what I am concerned about.
Well, Minister,
and I'm surprised at your lack of concern about it, but your overwhelming concern about table 2.3, to be honest.
I need to make sure, I would like to make sure, with respect, Minister, that the information that is
Senator
before us...
McGrath, your leader has gone out and said he will sack 40,000 Canberra-based public servants.
So you're not
and
concerned...
you're like, oh dear, what's happening on table 2.3? I mean, seriously.
Well,
come on,
Minister, the evidence...
public servants, according to
the
table.
And it's been updated with the actuals.
But
so I don't know.
no.
I don't know if you're arguing it's too little or too much, and then you're going to sack 40,000 anyway. I don't understand your level of concern.
But Minister, last year's budget, does have your name on it, but it's just been shown to have inaccurate information. You're the Minister for the Public Service.
I am.
But the tables
and
that
I
are
will
being
defend
presented...
them, and I will argue against your
But you can't tell us precisely how many public servants there are, because the figures across 4 years between the two tables are different, and you don't seem concerned about this.
I'm concerned about the sacking of 40,000 public servants.
So you're not concerned
I am
about...
very concerned about that, and I'm very concerned that you're not concerned about that, Senator McGrath, and that you are now trying to be concerned about something else, when many of the jobs in here that you're concerned about, apparently, will be terminated if you win the election. So forgive me if I don't take it seriously about your level of angst and concern about table 2.3.
I would just hope that the information that is being presented to the Australian people is correct information.
Yes.
But
I'm sure that keeps you awake at night when you're thinking about how you're ruining the lives of 40,000 families across the nation. I'm sure table 2.3 is the thing that keeps you up.
But I take it, Secretary, you are concerned enough to make sure you'll take on notice to come back in terms of...
Absolutely. So, Senator, my understanding, and I will confirm this, my understanding is that what the differences are whether the column in table 2.3 contained the original estimates of ASL in a given year or the final estimates of ASL in a given year. And so the numbers that were in the table before were correct in the sense that they did reflect the estimates in that year of how many ASL there would be. My understanding is that consideration in this budget was given to the fact that a better way of showing what the outcomes is across time is to include at all times what the revised estimate of ASL is in that year. That's my understanding. That's the information I've been able to get while I'm here at the table.
Yeah.
As I've said, I'm very happy to take it on notice. This is not about... This is not about there being errors in the database. There are unavoidably two numbers for every year that could have been reflected in this table. One is the original estimate of ASL in the year, and the other is the final estimate of ASL in the year. And we have, for consistency, decided that a better way of showing these data is to have the revised estimates all the way down. Anyway, as I said, Senator, that's my understanding.
That's my understanding too.
I am happy to take it on
Yeah.
notice, and I'm happy to provide any detail if that is not, if anything else is revealed to me.
So, yeah, in particular, the years. Sorry, Senator
Senator
Pratt.
McGrath, just, I'm going to rotate the call very shortly. I'll let you finish putting your question, however.
I've got a little bit more to go, so if you want to rotate the call now, it's fine.
No problem. Senator Sheldon.
Good, thanks. Thanks very much, Chair. Just in this very important conversation about the impact on strange services, it's only an important question of 41,000 families being affected. It's the millions of families that are affected around the country because those services are undermined. I know in earlier evidence there was discussion about the National Emergency Management Authority. Just before I ask the direct question, during the recent event in Queensland and northern New South Wales, I want to say to all those people from the National Emergency Management Authority to say publicly and congratulate them on the hard work, dedication and thoughtfulness that they put in place. You know, too often you see people criticise public service for not being agile, which is unfair, but you can't get a better example of how agile the public service was in leading up to and dealing with that event. Dealing with multiple agencies within the National Public Service, Centrelink, many of them based in New South Wales and Queensland, and also large numbers in the ACT. Coordinating with Centrelink, coordinating with state authorities in different states, coordinating with local government public servants. You know, these are all those public servants that happen to provide services that help millions of people in this country to be assured that their governments on every level were going to protect and support them. That was coordinated by NEMA. We have just had announced today that we're going to have that organisation gutted, gutted not only in our regions and in this state, but gutted for every service that needs coordination and response to the ever-growing climate challenge that we have in this country. And to have these people stand here and say and sit here and announce this sort of trite sort of commentary is an embarrassment to this country, because it will mean devastation for so many people in desperate need when we're going to see more and more of these events. Minister, we know publicly, we're not deniers. I even think my colleagues on the right-hand side of me aren't deniers of climate change. They know what the consequences are, and even with those consequences, are going to doom people to a lack of coordination, a lack of response by government when people are in the most desperate need. You know, this impact, if I got it wrong, was this 41,000 going to be something that's going to have an impact right across for everybody in this country and many millions of people for the great work that's been done and only so recently demonstrated?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know they'd been talking about it for months, but to hear it from the Leader of the Opposition tonight that they think those jobs are excess to requirements and that they'll be abolished and savings found, I mean, I know exactly what it'll mean. It'll mean longer waits, poorer service, in job losses in regions and towns all over the country. It'll mean veterans go back to waiting 2 years to get their claims allocated if they're lucky, if they don't pass away in the meantime. It'll have devastating impacts. And I know what they'll do if they get the chance to, if they actually do get the chance to govern, is they'll employ a shadow workforce like they did last time. It's just off the books. They're just not honest about it. And I note Senator McGrath can't even bring himself to defend the decision tonight.
It's estimates, Minister. I'm here to ask questions, not
but
answer your questions.
You're not running to the defence of your leader, are you? Because you're sitting in front of a room full of hard-working public servants who you basically have just told you're going to sack a lot of them.
No, I've got questions that I'm putting to you, and that's my role here. So, but I think my colleague Senator Sheldon has some questions that he's putting to you.
Well, it's good to see that they're not supporting, unfortunately, not supporting...
It's harder to look people in the eye and say it. I accept that.
And particularly when you're looking people in the eye that are actually doing the work that makes a difference to this country for millions of Australians.
Yeah. Oh, and the fact that they always, the Leader of the Opposition always seeks to demonise Canberra-based public servants. when the reality is, and I heard him say it again tonight, we'll protect frontline services. Of the 14,000, the vast majority of those are frontline services, defence, national security, Home Affairs, Services Australia, the ATO, the National Disability Insurance Agency. They're all front-facing, either keeping us safe, providing services. There is absolutely no way you can sack 40,000 public servants without affecting frontline service delivery. I mean, if you sack the whole Finance and Treasury Department, you're pretty much only getting up to 5,000, I think.
Less.
Less?
No,
you poor things.
Not that many.
No, between you and Treasury?
Yeah, no.
Oh, well, add PM&C in there then. You'll probably get to 5,000. These people are talking about 40,000.
I guess they want to bring PwC back because, you know, that's been a great example in my mind. I'm not asking them to make it further.
Well, the idea you'd find $7 billion in savings and not have to employ a shadow workforce is it's not credible.
And of course, employing a shadow workforce means that, as we know, that doesn't mean it's cheaper. Certainly doesn't mean it's more efficient, because we've seen that what's happened with the Department of Veteran Affairs, and also the capacity to coordinate across different agencies becomes limited.
Yeah, no, it's clearly very evident that in those high volume agencies where they were using a lot of labour hire, so Services Australia, the NDIA, Veterans Affairs, and I think their Aged Care and Quality and Safety Commission as well was a big user of labour hire. They were more expensive arrangements because you've got a for-profit provider that's clipping the ticket on the way through, so of course it's going to cost more. But you get a poorer service too because people aren't training and getting all the skills they need to provide a seamless service as well. So that was the other loss, the kind of loss of the skill and the professionalism of those positions.
And this is not a reflection on those people that are labour hired. The fact is, if you're not trained, you're not skilled, you're not given a career path, you're not given the opportunity to develop further, you're holding, in this case, tens of thousands of Australians back while sacking tens of thousands of other Australians. You've actually got a virtuous horror show, or the opposite to a virtuous circle. You've got a horror show, a circle of destitution with regards services being better provided for the Australian public, let alone appropriate opportunities provided for Australians trying to deliver for their communities.
Yep, absolutely. And we have offered many of those labour hire workers the opportunity for a good, secure, well-paid job, of which around a third of the additional staff fall into that category.
Minister, I'm very aware that particularly when it came to wages and conditions as well for public servants, that whilst the companies that were offering often labour hire work in many circumstances were charging with clipping the ticket, as you said before, but rather than the workforce getting those wages, those skilling, that training, that opportunity, hard-working Australians wanting to make a difference for their families, the ticket was being clipped for somebody right up the top, and often companies overseas. So here they want to export money overseas, export profit overseas, have Australian workers on lower wages, no job opportunity, no training, and services in this country being demolished.
Yep, that's what's at stake.
And of course, we've seen that with same job, same pay when they've proposed those sorts of arrangements as they have every other arrangement that's made a fairer playing field.
Thank you, Senator.
That's right, Senator Sheldon, and that's what we're going to have to fight to protect.
Senator McGrath.
Thank you. So, Minister, in the Mandarin on February 10, it reported that Minister for Finance, Government Services, Women in the Public Service, Katie Gallagher, says she does not believe the Australian Public Service needs to grow above the present average staffing level of 209,000 people. Obviously, it's going to increase again. Is there any level that you'd be uncomfortable with the public service growing to?
I have been clear, as I was at that conference, that I believe the public service is resourced appropriately.
So, but since the 24-25 budget, there's now an additional 5,500 public servants, give or take. Is that correct?
Well, the largest increase really has been the conversions of labour hire to permanent public service roles. So they were there, but they were like them, off the books. The National Disability Insurance Agency has converted those roles into permanent public service roles. So I think my comments remain. I think it's appropriately resourced now. I don't see the need for significant increases. I said at that Mandarin conference, shame you weren't there, Senator McGrath, to explain to all the people in the room why you're going to sack 40,000 people. But as I said in the room, there will be ons and offs across agencies over time as programs terminate and new ones begin. But I think roughly we have the balance right.
You said the balance was right for a figure of 209,000.
Did I,
Yes.
Senator McGrath? Is that in quotation marks, is it?
Well, that's the figure that...
I think I was asked a question from memory, considering I was there at that conference and you weren't, did I believe it needed additional resourcing? And my answer was, I think it's resourced appropriately. Obviously, I was making those comments with knowledge of what was in the budget papers and that there had been a small additional increase based on labour hire conversions.
But you were asked, Minister, whether the APS needed to grow beyond the 209,000 figure, and you said, I don't believe so, and I've looked at this pretty carefully.
I think it's largely, well, with some ons and offs and some conversions and all of those arrangements, it is, I think, appropriately resourced. I haven't changed my view on that.
But we've now got, what?
Are you worried about that, Senator McGrath? When I find it confusing that you have these significant worries, but you're not at all worried about decimating the public service. This is what's confusing me tonight.
Would you agree the figure of 230,000 is too high?
I think it's appropriately resourced now. I don't see the need for significant adjustments to ASL across departments. Obviously, there will be movements, like when the submarine agency really gets going, there will be some additional staffing there, I imagine. Just as when programs finish or, new technology is adopted, there might be some downward revisions in other agencies. But do I think the public service should be $41,000 workers shorter? No, I don't. I think that would be a disaster.
That wasn't the question I asked.
I'm answering your question as best as I can.
I think I'm answering a different question.
No, I'm not.
But you said that you're comfortable with the 209,000 figure, but we're now up to 213,000. So
Well, I've explained that to you, and I'm sorry if you're having trouble understanding that explanation. But what we've done is we've taken some people who were being paid off the books, so they were actually working for the NDIA, but they weren't counted in the staffing numbers, and they have now been converted to permanent roles because that is what's required, and so they've been added to the staffing number. So it's not additional staff. Those jobs have always been there or have been there, and they are now being done in a permanent capacity.
So in terms of the difference between the 24-25 budget figure and the actual 24-25 financial year that was printed in this year's budget is around $1.168 billion. This is in relation to employee expenses of the APS. So that would be for the extra 5,500 public servants?
Can you just link me to where you're reading from? What table?
It's note 7 in budget paper 1.
you have a page number?
294.
Oh, yeah. Miss Patterson has got it. 294. She knows where all the numbers are buried.
So, Senator, you're referring to the, you're doing comparison of 24-25 to 25-26 for wages and salary
yes.
expenses.
I'm just trying to work out that figure. So the 1.168 billion, which is the difference. I just want to. That'll be the cost for the additional 5,500 public servants. So it's the difference between the wages in 25-26, between the 24-25 forecast and then the 25-26 forecast.
Yep. So certainly these figures for wages and salary expenses are they are estimates, and they're provided to us by the agencies as to what they expect to spend on their employees in terms of wages and salaries. So on that basis, certainly the advice that we've collected from entities is that their expenditure in 25-26 at this point, based on the ASL and other allocations that have been given to them, and the profile of those staff will be that figure 30,450.
Just so I understand, in the next year, 26-27, I'll read this correctly, the additional cost is only 352 million. And the following year, the additional cost is only 300 million when you compare the 24-25 budget and the 25-26 budget.
Oh, so you're comparing it against the 24-25 budget papers, or are you looking at the estimates in Note 7 for the 25-26? I mean, they're obviously those estimates will change from year to year depending on the decisions of government and therefore the advice from entities as to what they expect to spend on wages and salaries.
There's also some movement in there, I'm told, from supplier expenses, which would be the labour hire, into APS wages. So they would have been accounted for in another part of the budget.
To your earlier point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'm trying to compare 25-26 across the two budget papers.
25.
Okay. So for the 25-26 year, it's going to cost the figure I was referring to before, $1.5 billion more?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Why are the wages of the new public servants only included in the 25-26 year?
They're not.
So they're not.
They're not?
This is, I think...
Yeah, this goes to the...
We talked
yeah.
about before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as Ms Patterson said, the wages and salaries line is the aggregation across all entities of what they expect to spend on wages and salaries over the forward estimates. And that reflects their internal decisions about how their departmental allocations, so that their departmental appropriations will be split between wages and salaries and supplier expenses. And that reflects a combination of, on the one hand, indexation of their departmental appropriations, which are indexed. So your departmental appropriation is indexed by a weighted average of the wage price index and the consumer price index, but with a productivity offset. It's then adjusted for the efficiency dividend. It's adjusted for the saving, the external labour save. And then there's an aggregate amount that an accountable authority has in each of those forward estimates years to allocate. And of course, the other thing is that, like all, we all have terminating programs. We have programs which were surge programs, which are finite programs. So it reflects the net of all of these things together, and it doesn't assume decisions of future governments. So this is the baseline.
This reflects all government decisions to date.
At this time.
So the wages bill after 25-26 declines?
Well, that reflects...
That's what that...
Yeah. And that reflects decisions made to date. So that will mean, like, for example, in this year's budget, there's 600 less Services Australia staff because they were brought on to do a specific piece of work about cleaning up a backlog. They have done that work, so they are not funded in an ongoing sense. So there is situations like that happening across the public service, and that will be reflected in this table going forward. So I don't know if you're criticising us for having too much staff or not enough at this point.
I'm just asking questions, Minister. So
yeah.
I'm not.
Have you been given the job to keep this going till 11? Is that the job that's been given to Senator McGrath tonight? Because that's what it looks like.
I'm naturally interested in this.
No, I know that.
So we've spoken before, Senator Hume spoke at the last estimates about the 11.2% wage increase for public servants.
Yep.
Now, the budget did not reflect an increase of 11.2% over the next 3 years.
Yes, it does.
Of public sector wages. So
yes,
you're saying it does?
Yes, it does. And I've said that the whole time, and it's not my fault if Senator Hume can't read budget papers.
So, but how is the government going to pay for this increase?
Well, agencies are not supplemented for the wage increase. They are provided indexation that Ms Wilkinson has taken you through to adjust for, costs, indexation that doesn't meet all the costs of wages, but it meets some of it, and they are, required to live within their appropriation. And we haven't changed the way they're being accounted for from when you were in government. It is exactly the same way.
So in terms of you're paying for it through the indexation, the efficiency dividend and the external labour save, is that correct?
Well, there's saves and there's indexation is essentially an expense. It's paid to departments, so departments get additional money and they have some reductions in expenditure, and then they have to live within their means and they have to deliver on the EBA outcomes.
Secretary, you've said to Senator Hume before that the budget forecast for wages and salaries expenses reflect current government decisions and do not preempt future government decisions, but the increase in wages by 11.2% is a government decision.
Yep, that's why it's reflected in the budget papers.
So it is there.
Well, agencies are required to meet their employee expenses through the appropriations that they're provided.
So you will, how are they going to do that? Do they, in terms of...
Why are you worried about it? You're going to sack 40,000 of them. Seriously, are you worried about whether or not they're going to get a pay rise? You're actually taking their job away.
That's not the question, Minister.
Well, seriously. I mean, I'm sorry, but I've told you the pay rise is accounted for, all government decisions made to date are accounted for, and you are essentially wasting everyone's time here hand-wringing over whether this is appropriate when your leader has just said he's going to sack 40,000 public servants. I mean, come on. Forgive me for not taking you seriously, other than that you being given the very honourable job the responsible job of wasting time until 11 o'clock tonight.
Chair, if the Minister would stop
No, I'm not going to, Senator Colbeck. This is the last evening, and frankly, after what I've heard your party is going to do if they win government to the public service here, I am going to make comments about it. And I'm not going to follow you. The first peep out of you tonight is feigning concern about this.
Personal reflections against colleagues is...
Well, imagine being given the very prestigious role of senior time waster in Estimates Committee. What an honourable, what a very prestigious role that is.
What a piece of work.
Senator Colbeck, do you have a point of order?
I think Senator McGrath called Senator Wong a piece of work today. Is that a new? And you just called me a piece of work.
Senators.
Called Senator McGrath a racist.
That is not what I understood happened.
That's what she did.
All right. Settle pedals.
She reflected on some comments you'd made in your inaugural speech, I believe.
She inferred that Senator McGrath was a racist, which is...
Well, anyway, I mean, at this point in night, and I apologise to the public servants who have to endure this, but I'm not going to just sit here and take this rubbish. So we can keep it going till 11 o'clock, which I'm very happy to do, or we can move to some other questions that don't relate to the size of the public service or the wages of public servants who you are going to sack.
If the pay rise is built in, as you're saying, then isn't the headcount going to decline?
Well, there are, as I said a few minutes ago, Senator McGrath, there are ons and offs across the public service. There are funding areas like in Services Australia where we have funded additional staff for a period of time where further work is being undertaken to work out what the ongoing resourcing requirements are, and that is reflected in the budget papers.
So you'll be sacking public servants then?
No, that is not correct.
But that's the only way your figures are going to add up, isn't it?
Well, I can't help it if you can't read budget papers. It's all been clear in the budget papers for some time.
Thank you, Minister. I've got some more questions. I just need to find... Secretary, I've got some questions in relation to the legal services directions. Probably in the context of ComSuper and so forth. So,
ComCover.
ComCover, sorry. Another set of questions coming. So the legal services directions expressly deal with confidentiality clauses. They say that an entity is, quote, only to agree that the terms of settlement are confidential and cannot be disclosed where this is necessary to protect the Commonwealth's interests. Are you able to explain what the Commonwealth's interests mean in this context? Is it a sum of money?
I might just ask Ms Antone, who's responsible for ComCover, to explain how we think about this.
Rachel Antone, First Assistant Secretary, Commercial Group. Senator, the legal services directions are very much the domain of the Attorney General's Department. They do put out guidance on each of the requirements which apply to non-corporate Commonwealth entities through the legal services directions. But I can say that, yes, they do apply to us, and so we do take this provision into account in the way in which we administer ComCover. And the Commonwealth's interests is quite a broad term which can take into account a variety of things. It's not normally purely that the number itself shouldn't be out there, although that could be one factor insofar as there may be precedential value that needs to be taken into account, so that a particular number doesn't then inadvertently prejudice future considerations of resolutions of other matters that may be afoot or are expected in the future.
So how does it, I think you've touched upon this, but just to clarify, so how does it protect the Commonwealth's interest to keep the settlement sum secret?
So, Senator, I'll just stress that that is not the sole purpose, nor is it the sole consideration. It could be one factor among many. And indeed, the government has made it quite clear since they set the standard report that confidentiality would only really be used in a manner that does not prevent individuals from sharing their story, and certainly from everyone learning from people's experiences. On your point about the dollar figure, to the extent that it might be taken into account in the context of these considerations as one small factor, as I say, what can occur is that when a number goes out, it can prejudice considerations in other contexts, because people often consider a figure and try to draw connections with other factual circumstances where, in fact, every matter turns on its individual circumstances.
I think you've answered this, but the legal services directions say that before imposing or agreeing to a condition of confidentiality, the entity is to satisfy itself, including by raising the matter with a party requesting the condition, that the condition is necessary. How would the department determine if that was necessary?
So, Senator, the process by which we consider whether confidentiality applies very much depends on the circumstances of the legal proceedings or claim that we are managing. And so the range of factors that would be taken into account to consider what's necessary will vary quite wildly from one claim to the next. And as I say, it's never solely a matter of not wanting the dollar figure to be made public.
The legal services directions also expressly state that entities, I quote, should also seek to incorporate an exception to enable voluntary disclosure of the settlement in whole or part to the Parliament or to a parliamentary committee. How do you do that and why?
So the legal services directions, as you point out in that paragraph 4.5, Senator, are accounting for the fact that there is proper process before Parliament or parliamentary committees. Of course, it goes without saying, there is a process of immunity that can be claimed at this table, and there is a process for the committee considering that. So the legal services directions are observing those protocols and processes as well.
So, this obviously is a parliamentary committee. If the department had entered into an agreement effectively pursuant under the terms of the legal services directions, you wouldn't be able to tell us, would you?
There would be a necessary consideration of the question, Senator, so we would certainly need to understand the implications of responding to said question, and no doubt turn our minds to whether or not public interest immunity would be something that the Minister would consider.
It is taxpayers' money though, isn't it?
Yes, Senator, it is.
Now, the remaining parts of, I think it's clause 4.5 of the legal services directions say that where practicable, the responsible minister is to be consulted before the entity agrees to a settlement inhibiting voluntary disclosure to the Parliament or to a parliamentary committee. Is that something that the department has done in agreements?
This is a matter for AGD, really. They have responsibility for the legal services directions.
Well, I suppose, Minister...
Are you deliberately talking slowly as well?
No. I'm just trying to make sure, Minister, that I'm...
I think you are. I've heard you speak a lot faster.
I'm trying to make sure I get the wording correct.
Right.
Which I think you'll know I do, and I'm trying to be thoughtful.
No, he's definitely not trying to drag things out. Didn't you get invited to the fundraiser, Senator McGrath? The post-budget replied drinks. Yeah, yeah. I'll buy you 5 tickets so you can take your friends as well. I've heard there's been a bit of action down there with some protesters, that's all.
I'll probably rent a crowd.
You could have been there on the doors.
So I just want to try and understand, though. Thank you, Minister, for your assisting with the answer there. But in relation to in relation to settlements, I just want to go back to that. In relation to the Department of Finance, my question was, where practicable, the responsible minister is to be consulted before the entity agrees for settlement inhibiting voluntary disclosures to the Parliament or to a parliamentary committee. Is, for the Department of Finance, the Minister for Finance, the table would be the responsible minister? Would that be correct?
Senator, my reading of that is that it's the minister responsible for the legal services directions themselves, being the Attorney-General, but I may need to confirm that for you.
So it wouldn't be, in terms of, I suppose, that clause. So you're saying, so I understand, 4.5, your advice is, I'm not disagreeing, is that where practical, the responsible minister is to be consulted before the entity agrees to a settlement inhibiting voluntary disclosure to the Parliament or to a parliamentary committee. That would not be the minister of the relevant departmental minister?
So, Senator, I would defer to the Attorney-General's Department to ensure that you are receiving the appropriate answer on how the legal services directions operate. As I say, my understanding and how we have complied is that the responsible minister is the Attorney-General. There are certain aspects of the directions in which the responsible minister, the Attorney-General, then delegates to other or provides authority for other ministers to operate on his behalf. But I think in this instance, it's the Attorney-General. And I'll correct that on the record if I'm wrong, Senator.
Okay. In general terms, is there an amount the department expects to pay for legal representation in a matter where there is a confidentiality clause?
Senator, not at all. The amounts that are paid at the end of the day are very much how long's a piece of string. It varies wildly depending on the circumstances, the complexity of the claim, the number of parties involved, the court and how it would like to proceed with the matter if the court is involved, a whole range of factors.
Okay. I want to ask about the claim brought by Ms. Joanne Tanarsky, the former Chief of Staff to the Deputy Prime Minister, who made various allegations in relation to workplace health and safety breaches in the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. How much did the Commonwealth pay to settle that matter?
Senator, It's long-standing practice that we don't discuss individual cover claims in this committee, in other committees.
How much did the Commonwealth pay for its legal representation in that matter, which is separate to the settlement figure?
I'm happy to take that on notice and consider whether we would provide that information.
I understand the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, was named as a respondent in that matter. Did the Commonwealth pay for his legal representation too?
Senator, we may also just need to take that on notice, only insofar as I just need to be clear on precisely what privacy or other implications there are for any answer. So if we may, we will need to get back to you on that.
And if you did pay for his legal representation, so if the Commonwealth did pay for his legal representation, how much? The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff was also named as a respondent in this matter. Did the Commonwealth pay for his legal representation too?
Again, Senator, will need to take that away to consider any privacy or other considerations that may be at play.
Could you also therefore take on notice how much the legal bills were for Mr. Gartrell, please?
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
You know, some other committees have given up. Senator McGrath, you're not, you know, you don't have to be last person standing. Maybe you could nick down to the fundraiser and have a quick drink and a cheers with everybody.
Thank you, Minister. Did the Commonwealth pay for Ms. Tanaski's legal representation?
Senator, the way in which ComCover operates and claims of this nature operate is that all staff of the Commonwealth are provided with supports in a usual fashion in a workplace, but once a matter becomes adversarial, for lack of a better term, it becomes very much that, and the Commonwealth is the employer in that dynamic, and the individual is bringing a claim against the employer. So in the usual sense, you would not normally see an employer pay for an employee to bring a claim against them.
Okay. Which law firms were engaged to represent the Commonwealth, Mr. Marles and Mr. Gartrell?
So, Senator, I can give you an answer with respect to the Commonwealth, and then as with the other questions that you've posed with respect to the other parties, we'll take the other components on notice to take into account privacy and other considerations. But for the Commonwealth's purposes, the solicitors on the record were Ashurst.
Okay. How much was paid to them in legal costs?
I'll have to take that on notice, sorry.
Were any other law firms engaged to provide legal advice or any other legal services in relation to this matter?
There were barristers involved, Senator.
Okay. On notice, could you list the barristers, and on notice whether you can say how much was paid to them in legal costs?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Were any other professional services firms engaged in relation to this matter?
No, Senator.
Okay. Was this matter reported as a significant legal issue?
Yes, it was.
Okay. On what date?
I don't have that with me, sorry, I'll take it on notice.
Thank you. I'm sure the Minister will be very pleased to know that I've finished my line of questioning.
For the entire night or just as a...
Not for the entire night.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then I'm not that thrilled. So...
I was going to be quiet.
Yeah.
So I'm done.
You're done?
Oh, you've done with finance.
You're done with finance.
I see. Well, that's good for finance, not good for me.
In the absence of the chair, I'll suspend for
Thank you.
15 minutes.
Can you hear us?
We can't. Could you get them to test their microphone again?
Hello, it's Senator Pratt here, Chair. We haven't... Oh, we are now on broadcast. Can we hear you?
Testing, can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Thank you. I welcome Mr Stuart Wiley, CEO and Managing Director of ASC and other officers. Do you have an opening statement this evening?
Yes, I do, Senator.
Okay. And I'm aware that you've been briefed on the application of parliamentary privilege while giving evidence overseas?
That's correct, yes, Senator.
Okay. Don't hesitate to, take care should there be anything arise, should anything arise in your giving of evidence that you might need that protection for. Senator Hume.
Thank you, and good morning to you guys. I think that it's actually... Sorry?
Did they say they did have an opening statement?
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
do?
My
Sorry.
apologies. It's been a long day. Mr Wiley.
Okay, thank you. ASC Pty Limited is extremely proud of the role it plays in supporting the world-class Collins-class submarine capability. It's a role we take very seriously. Recent public commentary regarding ASC's performance of a life and type extension load program has been inaccurate and misleading. I do not intend to comment directly on the assertions made in the media beyond this opening statement. While decisions regarding the scope and scheduling of Collins-class submarine sustainment are matters of the Department of Defence, ASC works closely both with Navy and NSC within the submarine enterprise to optimise Collins-class capability and availability outcomes within the allocated resources, including the delivery of the LOPE program. ASC can assure the committee that submarine safety will not be compromised through the LOPE program. Over and above the normal safety processes, and noting the development nature of the LOPE design, an independent governance regime was established at the onset of the program to ensure the program's standard performance and objectives are met and maintained. The latest review found that the proposed designs for each of the LOPE tasks are technically sound, no new significant technical issues were identified, and the maturity of the detailed design for the four projects is progressing satisfactorily. LOPE is a complex developmental program. As with any program of this complexity, there are manageable and ongoing challenges associated with specific deliverables, and we continue to work closely with our submarine enterprise partners to mitigate these challenges. Meeting our contractual commitments to ensure safe, available and reliable Collins-class submarines to the Royal Australian Navy is ASC's highest priority, along with our safety of our workforce and the nation's submariners. ASC continues to progress the LOPE design process as per our contracted commitments, which include contractual coverage of the planning and the conduct of the first LOPE full cycle docking on mid-2026. The current nominal planning schedule and basis of estimate will be refined to establish the actual LOPE SCD schedule and resource application through the normal maintenance planning process. This process will commence 12 months ahead of the full cycle docking. This normal process is what ASC outlined in the committee at our last estimate appearance. ASC more broadly continues to meet its obligations under the respective task statements and progress its role as a nation's sustainment and build partner for the conventionally armed nuclear submarine program. ASC in the last 12 months has deployed 150 personnel overseas to acquire and develop the skills and capabilities to support these programs. As ASC is well aware of the significance of the critical role it undertakes and the importance of the work to Australia's national security.
Thank you. Senator Hume?
Thank you.
I just might advise also that ANI was released, just for those listening and following the program. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Wiley, for your opening statement, and I acknowledge the assertions in that statement. I do note that you said that you don't intend to comment directly on the assertions made in the media beyond this statement, but obviously that's not necessarily how Senate estimates works. So we will be asking you some questions specifically about some of those assertions, and I do hope that you will be able to enlighten us a little further above and beyond the detailed statement that you have made. Obviously, at the last Senate estimates, Vice Admiral Hammond said that to questions from Senator Reynolds that at this stage our intention is still to conduct a life of type extension on all 6 submarines, commencing with Farncombe in 2026. And he said the plan for Farncombe is unchanged at the moment, which he then clarified to the plan for Farncombe is unchanged. Now, since then, has there been any change made to the plan for the Farncombe Life of Type Extension program?
From our contractual basis at Centre, our work remains as per contractual scope. We, as yet, assume a normal scope for Farncombe, and as I said in my opening statement, the detailed planning window is yet to open up for Farncombe SCD.
So is that no change has been made to the plan?
The basis of our working continues as per our contract, Senator, and the detailed planning for Farncombe specifically, as I said in my opening statement, won't occur until 12 months out from the activity per se.
Right. So as per the contract, I suppose, does the contract allow for changes to the plan? And if it does, has the contract been changed or has the plan been changed?
I'm going to defer to my colleague Paul Gay on this particular question.
Thanks, Mr. Wiley. Paul Gay, Chief Operating Officer for Multi-Class Sustainment. Senator, since Chief of Navy made those comments, there's been no change in our plans. Senator.
Had the plan been changed before the Chief of Navy made those comments?
Senator, the design phase that we're in at the moment is proceeding as it has, Senator. So there's no particular change there. We are still in the detailed design phase and we're still progressing.
Have any changes been considered to the scope of the life of type extension?
Senator, in terms of consideration, if it's not in our contract, that would be a matter for Defence to comment on, Senator.
Is there a version of the life of type extension that's being considered that would in any way reduce the works that are being undertaken?
Senator, it's a difficult question to answer because we work very closely with Defence, and as you'd imagine, that we are always in conversations around particular aspects of scope, etc. But broadly, as Mr. Wiley said in his opening statement, there's no particular change, but there's always conversations around minor adjustments, Senator.
So, is there a timing around which a decision will be made for the final scope of the life of type extension program for Farncombe?
Yes, Senator, as Mr. Wiley said, we start that detailed planning phase about 1 year out from commencement with a process in our contract of what we call the advanced planning letter, and we expect that, about 12 months out from commencement. That is when Defence will definitively tell us what the scope for the first load FCD is. All
right, and 12 months out from commencement is, sorry, can you just remind me, it's in this opening statement, mid-2026?
It's approximately mid this year, Senator.
Mid this year is the beginning of the 12 months, or it's the...
It's the beginning of the detailed planning phase, Senator.
Right. Is it possible that the final life of type extension program will not prepare Farncombe for another 10 years of service?
Again, Senator, it's not really for us to comment on how Navy manages its capability. Our role at the moment is the detailed design phase, and as we've just said, we will see the detailed implementation scope approximately 12 months out from there. So, at this stage we're proceeding on the design on the basis of the current usage and upkeep cycle. But any changes to that, Senator, or decisions around that would be a matter for defence.
Are the decisions that are made around life of type extensions, are they the same for each vessel?
No, the particular scope is really assessed on a vessel by vessel basis.
Right, so it's possible then that the overall life of type extension program, I'm sorry if you feel like I'm shouting into the microphone, maybe I think it's because I couldn't hear Mr Wiley so well, so I'm bellowing for the sake of it.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Your comms are very clear.
Oh, good. Is it possible then that the overall life of type extension program may upgrade some of the Collins-class submarines for an additional 10 years service, but not others?
Again, Senator, from our perspective, it's a hypothetical, because we are working on the design, and Defence will tell us what the implementation scope is at the APL. At the advanced planning letter, 12 months out. So, it is, from our perspective, that is speculation from our point of view, but that would be a question for Defence, Senator.
Do you advise Defence on what is and is not possible as part of that scope?
What we do, Senator, we work very closely with Defence, as you'd imagine. We are co-located as per the course of our contract, and we have all those type of conversations. But ultimately, the decision for what goes in there is Defence.
Are there some vessels upon which you are advising are more difficult to extend for 10 years than others?
Senator, I wouldn't go as far as to say more difficult to upgrade for the 10-year position, but each vessel has a slightly different configuration. They have done, certain submarines have done more sea time, etc. So there are different variables on the platforms, and when we get that advanced planning letter from Defence, we look at those aspects and then give them advice of what that schedule may look like.
All right. Well, then, to your knowledge, have there been any delays in the planning or the design work for the life of type extension program more broadly?
Senator, I would say that we have a detailed design phase which supports the implementation.
That didn't sound very definitive.
No, well, it's. I would say your comment there was more broadly. We would say that we have a design phase which supports the implementation. So the design phase, you're saying, needs to be somewhat elastic in order to deliver on Defence's specs and expectations? No, Senator. We, in terms of, like as Mr Wiley said in his opening comments, it is a complex and developmental program. So I do apologise if I'm not being super definitive, because there are small parts of the scope that do move around. So and ultimately the decision for that is for Navy to or Defence to consider that scope.
So the remediation plan for the sustainment that came out of the February Projects of Concern Summit, did that foreshadow any changes to life of type extension?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. The projects of concern is actually, the remediation plan is actually classified.
Right. Isn't that, though, essentially just an iteration or an articulation of what you're doing on the planning and design work for the life of type extension program that you're describing to us?
Senator, the remediation plan is classified, so I really couldn't comment on what is in or isn't in that.
Okay. So what pressures then exist that would delay the planning of the life of type extension program?
Senator, again, it's sort of a future works question. As Mr Wiley said in his opening statement, this is a complex and developmental program, and we do assess the scope on a platform by platform basis. And there are all sorts of challenges that we have discussed here before in this forum, and as Mr Wiley pointed out his opening statement, there are all sorts of issues that we are dealing with now. Some of them are product of concern related around productivity, supply chain, etc. So there are a lot of pressures in there, Senator. There's no definitive one particular issue.
So the Defence Portfolio Budget Statement says that of the life of type extension, it says during 2025-26, the project will continue to progress core design elements through to production readiness. So does that indicate that progress in the life of type extension, life of type design planning schedule, planning is behind schedule?
No, Senator. What that's saying, and again, that's a defence budget, so it'd be really for them to talk to the details. But the way I would interpret that is the design phase is funded, and it is moving into, once we get through the detailed design phase, the words there were production readiness. So testing the implementation, the feasibility of the implementation is what I'd say for that, Senator.
Okay. Can I ask if Defence has recently requested changes to the life of type extension program that were not previously within its scope?
Not to any significant extent that I'm aware of, Senator. And I say that, sorry, I can see the puzzled look on your face. There are incremental changes to our contract as the maturity of the design moves forward. But the core design, as we have talked about, is in its design phase. There are minor adjustments to our contract as additional procurement or things like that arise.
Are they material or minor?
I'd say, I might have to take that on notice in terms of its materiality, but I don't see that as a scheduled risk. It's more of a progression of the design, Senator.
Progression of design, okay. Have changes been signalled for Farncombe's Life of Type extension program following its listing as a project of concern?
Again, Senator, the product of concern is classified, and any questions relating that would be a matter for Defence.
All right. This is very frustrating. You know that, don't you? You can probably tell.
Well, you're asking a lot of questions that are really Defence related, so...
Well, they are entirely relevant to the work that ASC does.
Well, yeah, ASC does the work that Defence asks it to do.
Mm. Hopefully. Is there any risk that a reduced scope in the Farncombe Life of Type extension program would impact the program for subsequent submarines?
Senator, again, like we just said, we look at the scope for each platform on a platform by platform basis. So I don't see a rolling or cascading effect through there, okay. Senator.
All right. I have some more questions about other issues. Clearly, I'm hitting my head against a brick wall here. Can I ask about progress on appointing a new CEO after Mr. Wiley's announcement of his retirement? How's the search going for the successor to Mr. Wiley?
It's not appropriate I actually comment on that. I'm not involved in the process, Senator.
What about
it's underway?
I'll take the question on notice, Senator.
It's okay.
It's all right. I don't think you're allowed to do
Mr. Wiley, we can...
Wiley.
It's underway.
It's
Process
underway?
is underway, yep.
Okay, so when we say underway...
It's not complete, it's underway.
Well, yeah, but I'm wondering to what extent it is underway. Has it gone out to tender? Is there a recruitment firm? Has there been an ad placed somewhere? Has there been anybody tapped on the shoulder and asked to apply? Has there been interviews held? How far through are we?
Senator, well, the process is technically being led by the ASC board itself,
right?
Because the CEO appointment is officially an appointment made by the board, but we are involved or across the process, and to to your question, it is underway. A recruitment firm the board is working with a recruitment firm. We are not so far down the track that we've got to interviews or anything like that yet.
Have we got a short list of candidates?
I'm not sure that we do have a short list yet, Senator, not that I'm aware of.
Right. Is there a timeline that we're working on to make decisions about Mr Wiley's successor?
As expeditiously as possible, I think, is the answer, Senator.
What does
It means we're trying to do it. We want to do it thoroughly. We want to do it properly. We want to find a good candidate, and we don't have a specific, and we don't want to waste any unnecessary time on it. But we don't have a specific deadline that.
Okay.
It's a very specialised role,
agreed.
and will require international search.
Yes. So it could be 2 months. It could be 6 months. It could be 12 months. Do you have a sort of a sense of we've got to get this done by?
I would hope of those 3 scenarios you painted, it wasn't the 12 months. But I really don't. We don't have from my perspective, or from our perspective, we're not working to a specific deadline. What's most important is that we find the board finds the right person.
So is there a plan for a transition period between Mr Wiley and his successor?
That's not a thing we've had cause to discuss with the board at this point, Senator.
Is there anybody online that can enlighten me as to whether that would be considered?
Well, I think I can say if we need
place to start.
It's sort of an awkward set of questions for Mr Wiley to offer an opinion on, I think. But I can if we need to consider a transition period, or I mean both, we will certainly do that. That'll be more us working with the board.
Okay.
Just is it a substantial appointment that requires cabinet?
Yes.
So there is a cabinet process subsequent to the board's recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeking an individual recommendation or
well, I can't comment on exactly how this will play out, Senator, but the way these things usually play out is the board arrives at a proposal is put to cabinet.
Yeah.
And then what happens after that obviously depends on cabinet, but it's usually, for the purposes of these sorts of things, a proposition is put to cabinet rather than cabinet getting a short list or a list to choose from, for example.
I've got some more questions, but
we'll keep going, Senator Hume.
Yep.
We're the last committee in the building, so keep going.
Senator Hume, you're the only person seeking the call.
Can I ask how many employees now work for ASC at Osborne?
Bear with me a minute, Senator. I'm not sure we actually got that specific detail, but we've got a location.
Probably wouldn't have been changed since the last estimates when I think this question was answered I'm sure we went through this, Mr Wiley, at the last estimates you appeared at, which was less than a month ago, I think.
Should have the answers to hand.
There's 1,689 permanent workforce in South Australia.
Thank you. Do you break down a daily cost of operations at ASC in Osborne?
We can do, but I don't believe we do that. I'm looking my CFO here.
No, we don't monitor.
Right.
Breakdown by day, Senator.
Okay. I mean, obviously, the reason I ask is that on the 7th of August last year, the AMWU pronounced that workers would walk off site at Osborne for 100 hours as part of their pay negotiations. And I'm wondering whether you have a record of how many workers participated in that particular industrial action.
I think we covered all of this at last estimates with Senator Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did.
So honestly, can we go back to the Hansard of the evidence that was given then?
I'm wondering if there is...
I mean, we've got officials in the UK taking time out from the work they're doing to do this, and you're asking them the same questions you asked
I know you've had a long week
a month
and you're
ago.
very tired. But
no, don't patronise me, Senator Hume. You are asking the same questions your party asked 3 weeks ago.
I'm asking them now, and I'd like to know whether there's any update. Now, I know it's late here, but it's actually 11:30 over there.
Yeah, we'll make it worthwhile, at least. I mean, we know you've been to a fundraiser and had a bit of fun, and you've come back and now you'd like to perform. But the reality is the questions you have asked
watching. I'm just asking the ASC
3 weeks ago
but
about the amount of hours lost, about how they're keeping up with it post the industrial action, about what the cost of industrial action was. It was all asked last time.
And I'm wondering if the ASC has any updates.
Right. Well, it was only 3 weeks ago and we haven't had any industrial action since then, so I find it very unusual if there would be any updates to the
those answers that were given, obviously, if they were asked and answered, then perhaps there wouldn't be so many pauses when I say, have you got things like a cost per day of operations at ASC?
Probably won't expect the same stupid questions to be asked.
I'm sorry?
Are these included in your 40,000 you're going to sack as well?
Were
or do you
there-
want to build some submarines?
Goodness me, you are tetchy tonight.
I'm not
Maybe
tetchy.
you
I'm
need
just
more
holding
sleep.
you to account for the decisions you've taken. You want to
If
find
you could just answer the questions that I
$7
asked, it
billion
would be fine.
in savings by sacking public servants. I'm
I
asking
can't
if you're
believe you're
including
filibustering
ASC
at
in
20
that.
to 11 at night.
Are
But,
you including
good on you.
ASC in the 40,000 public servants you're going to sack? Or do you want to build and sustain the Collins Park?
Perhaps
Right.
you've already beaten me to it.
What does that mean?
Mr. Wiley, do you have any record of how many workers participated in that industrial action?
I'm sure he does back in Adelaide, not in London.
Sorry.
Sorry,
I know the
Mr.
Minister
Wiley.
keeps
It's
interrupting
been
you,
a
Mr.
very
Wiley.
long week.
No problems. I don't have that in front of me. I mean, obviously, any one day, there are different numbers that actually will take an action, but we have records of people taking action in our system, Senator.
So, have you estimated the cost to production, including the delays, the follow-on delays, as a consequence of that industrial action?
We've estimated, well, we know exactly how many hours we lost as a process, as a result of the action centre.
Right.
I can give you that. I can give you that a bit closer to home. Senator Reynolds, can you give us an update on the workers' strike? From memory, you provided us with an estimate of the impact on the schedule. So what is the latest on the impact of the strike on the schedule? Mr. Wiley, I don't think we provided an impact on the schedule. What we provided was an impact of the direct labour hours lost associated with industrial action, and the final figure was about 20,000 man-hours lost over 52 industrial actions across the two states.
20,000
That's a
over
lot,
52.
Senator Reynolds said. What was the impact? That's the lost hours and the number of actions. So what was the material impact on the schedule? That's currently being worked through, Senator Reynolds. Senator Gallagher, here, I enter the conversation. Part of the remediation plan is working through some of those issues. Senator Reynolds. So we've got a situation, Mr. Wiley, where you're responsible for a schedule to deliver these vital national assets, and we've heard in September that these 52 industrial actions had a significant impact on the availability of Collins. It goes on. So you're now telling me that the impact of the schedule from this was 29,000 hours. Mr. Wiley, well, the industrial action didn't finish until November. We basically got an agreement at the end of November, and it was only ratified in the Fair Work Commission last week in terms of the South Australian agreement. Just to make sure, Senator Reynolds, 29,000 hours lost, correct? Mr. Wiley, yes, direct hours lost by people taking industrial action, approximately.
Sorry.
It goes on and
Just want
on.
to make sure Hansard's getting a record of the Hansard record.
Well, and I'm
Minister, can I ask you a question then? Are the
Certainly.
additional costs accounted for in this budget?
Well, we have not provided any additional funding to ASC, if that's what you're asking.
So what I wanted to ask Mr. Wiley was, are the costs from that industrial action reported to the Commonwealth?
Yes.
And are those costs then
no,
accounted for in your budget?
The
Minister?
ASC has provided updates to me on the industrial action and other matters relating to ASC. And they are, as Mr Wiley gave in evidence just 3 weeks ago, the remediation plan through that and working through that is part of their ongoing work. But have we been asked for or provided any more to ASC? The answer to that is no.
So, Senator, it's probably worth, the costs associated with the work ASC does are costs that are a matter for defence. So if there's a need, it's a matter between the customer and ASC.
So the 18.5% pay rise that employees were given in November last year, that was a very high pay rise.
Not as high as they were, the industrial dispute was over, Senator Hume.
In the 12 months of negotiations, did the ASC witness a significant amount of staff moving to Perth to take up similar work for more pay? Was that a phenomenon that you saw in Osborne?
No, Senator.
No.
Okay, good.
And but the industrial dispute was linked over connections to Perth.
So at the time of the bargaining, what percentage of ASC's workforce supported the AMWU?
I think it was pretty well supported.
Just asking for the percentage.
Well, I don't know if there's a percentage, but it's a pretty highly unionised work site.
So is it more than 50%, less than 50%?
Is that a question for me now?
Yes,
Senator?
yes, they were all for you, Mr Wiley, you just got interrupted.
But we don't know who actually the union themselves. So, but I mean, as I think I previously said, the action was taken by our trades resource, and they would be of our total workforce probably for the Osborne around 25% in terms of the totality of number.
Right, sorry, I just had struggled to hear you a little bit there, Mr Wiley, so I just want to be clear. Did you say that around 25%?
Approximately, I'm just listening to the approximate.
Yeah.
Look, I can take that question on notice and give you a definitive number what percentage of our trade workforce is in Osborne to the broader work ASC company. I'll take that question on notice and I'll give you the definitive answer.
Okay, well, Minister, have you been briefed then on the additional cost to ASC's operation as a result?
I have been
of the
briefed
agreement?
appropriately on all matters relating to the ASC. They send me regular updates.
Okay, well, as the shareholder minister, obviously, and a member of the ERC, to what extent was the potential impact on critical national security projects accounted for when you considered the same job, same pay legislation?
Oh, I see where we're going. So you think this is a result of same job, same pay?
Well, it doesn't. It is clear in that legislation.
I think it was more linked to the fact that the workers in WA had achieved a higher pay outcome for a number of different reasons in a previous round, and my understanding was workers at Osborne were trying to argue that they should get a similar outcome. That wasn't ultimately where we landed or where the negotiations landed. You know, from my point of view, from the Defence Minister's point of view, we were keen to see the industrial dispute resolved, as you would expect we would be.
So obviously, under your legislation, unions don't require a majority of support from staff in order to negotiate. That's why I asked how many of the staff at Osborne are actually members of the AMWU.
Well, I think Mr Wiley's answered as much as he can. I would have thought it would be higher than that on a work site like that, but then I can't give you that figure tonight. I don't have it
Minister, you could then
And people don't
answer.
actually have to tell you if they're a member of a union. I know under your administration you might like to frog march them out and make them all show
You're
their union
so tetchy
cards.
tonight.
No,
I
not
just
at all.
want to ask some questions.
I'm not tetchy
Goodness
at
me,
all.
you
I've been
need some more
enjoying
sleep.
this enormously tonight.
I
You've
can
missed
tell.
most of it, Senator Hume, because you've been at the fundraiser. I've had a great time tonight.
I can
Loved
tell.
every second that I've been
Good.
sitting
You've
here.
only got another
So,
10 minutes to go.
9 minutes according to my watch.
unless we
so we were
decide to
keen to
stay
get
on.
the industrial dispute resolved. It has been resolved. I know you're trying to link it to same job, same pay. I don't think it can be. I think the union advocated in the interests of their members. As you would expect, the employer sought to resolve it. There was industrial dispute for a number of months. It's been resolved and a remediation plan is being worked on, as you would expect.
I know you are in a domestic portfolio, not an international one, Minister, but...
Well, I am a member of NSC, so I have some line of sight. Thank you for all matters relating to our international interests and our national security.
Have any concerns then been raised by AUKUS partner nations about the potential...
we don't disclose discussions between AUKUS partners
I haven't even finished the question.
Well, I'm just telling you, I don't think it's any surprise to you. Your question was, have any concerns been raised by AUKUS partners? And I'm saying we don't answer questions like that at estimates.
So you don't feel that there is any reason for AUKUS partners to be concerned about the potential for union negotiations to cause lengthy
Why are you
delays?
talking down the workers
and
at
add
ASC
significant
and their
costs to the
capability?
AUKUS programs?
Why would you be doing
I still
that?
haven't finished.
Why would you be doing that, though?
I still haven't finished the question.
We have enormous faith in ASC to deliver what Defence requires of them. The industrial dispute has been resolved. Plans are underway to make up time on that, and negotiations will continue between ASC and Defence.
In March last year, the government announced that ASC would partner with BAE Systems to build the SSN AUKUS at Osborne in South Australia, and it was reported last week that the AMWU is now demanding a 30% pay increase at BAE Systems in Adelaide. Now, that same report indicated that about 500 workers were participating in industrial action where the workforce is believed to be nearly 2,500. So can I ask this question to the ASC? Do you think that your negotiations with the AMWU last year have set a precedent for the unions to demand higher, and so in some circumstances unfairly high, wage rises, even when they don't have the majority of support among workers?
Well, there's a lot of ifs.
I wasn't
there's
asking
a lot,
you, Minister.
No,
I've got
I know,
one for
but,
you too.
Well, let me just tell you, there's a lot of ifs in that. So I'm not sure anyone, if this happens, and do you think this happens because of that, because they didn't have a majority of union membership? Look, it's a matter for BAE Systems to negotiate with their employees. In the end, we were able, through ASC, was able to reach agreement with its employees.
So, again, to ASC, has this set a precedent, do you think, that has allowed unions to unfairly demand high wages even when there isn't a majority of support among the workers?
I think the negotiation of the BAE is their negotiation. So our negotiation was as the Minister said, was based on some historical issues that have been driving the workforce to make the claim, and we negotiate with them on that basis. And
so 30% you think is a reasonable demand?
Well, I don't think Mr Wiley needs to provide an opinion on that. It's a claim by a union in a negotiation, Senator Hume. I know that's a foreign concept to you, that people would have a negotiation about getting wage outcomes for their workers.
Just calm down, we've got 5 more minutes.
I'm not tetchy at all. I'm finding you frustrating because you're just perpetuating your anti-union, anti-worker kind of ideology here late at night without any obvious reason other than
cost of the
you want to.
taxpayer.
Well, other than you want to keep going.
Concentrate on cost
Well,
to the
we've
taxpayer.
already
Who would have
told.
thought?
Well, we've already.
If somebody in a finance portfolio would be interested in cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Who would have thought?
divert over there, but really, your problem is about workers and unions, and we see that. We know that. We'll no doubt hear more of it from you, but at 5 to 11, it's not related to budget estimates as far as I can see, because I've answered your question
Well,
about
I'm going to
anything
ask you
in
then.
the budget that relates to this.
Have you then,
and-
Minister, if you'd let me just ask a question, have you been briefed on the
I've
potential
told you.
fiscal impacts of such high increases to the bottom line?
The potential of
for our
high
August
increases of a
projects?
union claim that's part of a negotiation with BAE Systems. Like,
So no?
I have been appropriately briefed at all times by ASC, and I will continue to be.
On the fiscal impacts?
I have been
of industrial
appropriately
action?
briefed on all matters relating to ASC by ASC, and I will continue to do so.
Is there a
and I
fiscal
thank
impact?
Mr Wiley and his colleagues for the leadership that Mr Wiley in particular, as he's departing the organisation, probably as soon as we can let him go, for all of the leadership he has provided that organisation. We've been fortunate to have him.
I agree and also acknowledge the leadership of Mr Wiley. Has there been a briefing about the fiscal impact?
I've told you, I've been appropriately briefed at all
I'm not
times.
asking whether it's been appropriate. I'm
Well,
assuming it is.
I've
If it was
answered-
inappropriate,
I've
it would be
answered the
strange. But is
question.
it fiscal?
I've answered the question, Senator Hume. I'm completely comfortable. I've answered the question. You might not like my
All right.
answer, but that is the answer.
Is there a
You can-
fiscal impact?
Well, I have been... No, that is a different question. The question you've been asking me is, have you been briefed on any fiscal impact? And my answer to that is I have been appropriately briefed at all times. If there is anything further relating to this, it will be reflected in the budget papers at the appropriate time. And it may be you, Senator Hume, if you win the election.
Maybe.
That is the normal way these matters get
That's
dealt
why I'm
with.
asking the
And there
questions.
hasn't been. Okay? So rest assured, I am appropriately briefed.
So is it reflected in the budget papers?
I have told you, all government decisions to date have been reflected in the budget papers. We've said that about 15 times
And is the
today.
fiscal impact of any industrial action reflected in the budget papers?
Well, we've answered that, and I've read out Senator Reynolds' answer to you about it.
So it is reflected
All
in the budget
government
papers.
decisions are reflected in the budget.
Yeah.
I have said there hasn't
This
been...
wasn't a government
there has-
decision, this
if you
was
had
inflicted
listened
upon you.
earlier, If you'd listened earlier, and perhaps you've had a little bit too much fun at the fundraiser, if you'd listened
Not for the
earlier,
campaign.
you asked about any supplementation or any increased funding, and I have answered that question. So you're asking the same question again. My answer that I gave earlier has not changed.
So there is no fiscal impact from the industrial action at ASC that is reflected in the budget?
Well, I've answered that. I answered it earlier.
Just yes or no?
I've answered it earlier. Sorry, Senator Hume, if you can't keep up with me. That's not my problem. I've
So
answered the
why
question.
can't you just say yes or no?
I've answered the question. It's going to continue to be my answer. If you didn't hear it or can't understand it, go back and read the Hansard.
I didn't ask that question though.
You did. You asked a similar question, and I answered it.
So there is fiscal impact from industrial action that is reflected in the budget.
Well, that's a different
In the
question.
2025.
That is a different question.
Well, can you answer that one?
That is a different question, and I will rely on the evidence that I have provided to your earlier questions.
You are very defensive tonight, Minister,
I
but I
am
understand
not
it's
very
been a long
defensive
week.
tonight.
It's been a long
Senator
week.
Hume, I am not.
Okay.
I really enjoyed this evening.
Chair.
I really
Thank you,
I
Senator.
really
Before we
wish
finish, Chair.
you
No,
could spend
Chair.
more time here.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for chairing this committee for the last 3
thank
years.
you.
I realise that we thought it was your last committee at the last estimates, and we didn't acknowledge your service in the chair. And I'm sorry about that. So I'm quite glad that at least we got a chance to do that tonight.
Thank you.
You have served your committee extremely well.
And we're going to miss
Thank
you, Lou.
you. Thank you,
a lot.
Katie.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you. I will miss all of you as well.
A little
Perhaps not these 11
Won't think of as
p.m.
much, but maybe this is
conclusions. And I want to thank all of my colleagues in the Senate and particularly everyone on this committee, but also to the public service who come to estimates hearings so that we can all understand the issues.
Well, there'll be a few left if they get in.
That concludes our hearing, so thank you to all witnesses. And thank you to Hansard and Broadcasting, and I thank you...
Thanks, ASC.
Thank all of you for your work throughout my career. And thank you to the ASC. We're now adjourned.
Well done,